a sweet treat and a product of slavery. Sensual pleasure, capitalism, and economics. Dorothee Elmiger's third novel, Out of the Sugar Factory, covers a lot of ground.
Sugar has always interested me as a material. For many, I would say it's historically been seen as an indulgence, something that you nibble on and give into, something you crave. Yet, at the same time, it was produced on sugar plantations under murderous conditions.
Elmiger explores the connection between covetousness and European colonialism. She travels through time, tracing biographies from Karl Marx to mystic Teresa von Avila to the first Swiss lotto millionaire. What links them? A hunger and the burning desire to transcend boundaries.
This wanting, this desire that I found in all of the characters in one way or another, was something I wanted to question. How does that develop? How is it shaped? How do we learn it?
In her book, everything is interrelated. New connections are always being made, yet there's no real plot. Elmiger says she can't and doesn't want to write novels that explain the world. Instead, she aims to make its fissures and fault lines visible.
Because that comes much closer to my understanding of things. I don't expect writing to bring me clarity and comprehension, but rather confusion and food for thought.
Dorothee Elmiger keeps coming up with new questions instead of answering them. Her fragmentary text is at once enticing and sobering.
Anne Beaumanoir, known as Annette. Was she a terrorist responsible for attacks which resulted in numerous deaths, or a saint who always supported the oppressed? She's now nearing 100. When Anna Weber first met Annette a few years ago, she knew she had to write about this woman and her incredible life. And she did so in the form of an epic poem.
I couldn't imagine writing a classical novel in which I'd put some words in my protagonist's mouth, for instance, or invent some dialogue. Soon I recalled that there was an ancient form in which great exploits and daring deeds were told. And that's the heroic epic. And with me it became a heroine's epic.
The woman whose life Anna Weber recounts as a novel in verse was born in a fishing village in Brittany. She was the only child of staunch communists who wanted to create a better world. Annette was determined to fight for that too. In 1940, when the Germans occupied France, she joined the French resistance, risking her life more than once. After the war, Annette plunged into a new battle, fighting for Algerian independence from France. Anna Weber writes how Annette, in exile, realized her Algerian comrades were just as brutal as their French occupiers. But does that make her a heroine?
It is a kind of homage, but it's not a hagiography. I'm always questioning, for instance, is it permissible to kill people to achieve a certain goal?
While reading the novel, Anne Beaumanoir says she didn't even recognize herself. The heroine of Anna Weber's epic is a literary figure as unique as the woman who inspired her.
Christine Wunnicke likes historical locations and figures. Her most recent work, whose translated title is The Lady with the Painted Hand, transports the reader to 18th century India. The German mathematician Carsten Niebuhr is stranded on a small island with the astronomer Musa al-Lahuri from Jaipur, a center of astronomy at the time.
Anyone who sees these pictures of the buildings in Jaipur has to want to know what life was like at the time. It's not easy to research. Well, there's a lot about astronomy and science, but not so much about all the surrounding stories.
That's why Wunnicke decided to write her own story about a Muslim astronomer and a Christian mathematician whose paths cross by chance. Under a foreign sky, their worldviews and religions collide and confront each other.
But then under the stars, it doesn't matter. Who cares whether they can pray together so long as they can gaze at the stars together?
But they even disagree on the stars. Whereas the German can make out the beautiful queen that is Cassiopeia, Musa interprets the constellation as a woman's hand painted with henna. Wunnicke celebrates these differences between Western and Eastern views with irony and empathy.
I'm glad that people who read it are often amused because they understand the certain tragic nature of my writing. I suffer too.
Christine Wunnicke has written a tragicomic novel about the adventure that is science.
A trip home where nothing has changed in all the intervening years. The industrial park looms over the residential areas. Those who live here don't even notice its dominance anymore. They simply live with it. Their chances of getting away are slim, and most don't even want to leave. Streulicht, translated as Sky Glow, is about a young woman who did leave. It's the literary debut of Deniz Ohde, who explores her own life in the form of a novel. The narrator, who has no name, is the daughter of a Turkish migrant mother and a German father who works at the local chemical plant. When she returns to her childhood home, she is overcome by a flood of memories. Of school, for instance, a time of humiliation. Nobody ever believed in her.
I didn't want to write a pamphlet against school or against toxic family relations. I wanted to depict how these relations and the situation in which the narrator found herself affected her inner life.
That situation is a society which talks about equality, but does not offer any opportunities to a working-class girl. Her parents are no help either, and would prefer their daughter to stay where she came from, pretty close to the bottom. The narrator follows a lonely path, but there is no anger. Quietly, resolutely, she manages to graduate from university. But her novel is not about criticizing the education system or giving instructions on how to improve it.
That would be a socialist understanding of literature, where the reader expects some kind of utopia or the possibility of a future. But I don't think that I can do that. And maybe literature can't do that either.
Streulicht is a painful book of memories, a book about alienation, and about a woman who creates a new life for herself. It is a work of intensive imagery, which remains with the reader.
Bjerg's novel is a road movie. A man and his son take a journey into the painful past, the desperate childhood of the father, who has a score to settle with his own father, a Nazi and a drunkard. It's a kind of exorcism.
It's something
like that. This character has sunk so low that it can't get any lower. And then he tries to climb his way out.
He goes in search of his missing father, one whose great-grandfather, grandfather and father all committed suicide, in the water, on land, in the air, a family of suicides.
The protagonist's problem is that his father took his own life early on, and in this way he turned away from his son in a way that is so radical it can't really be surpassed. The tradition stopped here. The boy would not be without a father, and he would not have a son who had no father, and his son would not have a son without a father.
The book's title, Serpentines, shows how the character is thrown back and forth to suffer each painful twist of life again. The journey takes him back to southwestern Germany. Depression travels along, as does his fear of ending up like his father.
This damn anger of the damn fathers directed against themselves and everyone. The children had to suffer for the childhood of their fathers, and I was also a damn father.
Healing is prevented by the half-truths, the family legends that are told proudly over and over again.
The problem is that a story might not even be half a truth, but by repetition, it seems ever truer, and then it's simply taken for fact.
And so the Serpentine journey becomes an attempt at salvation from one's own family, from one's country's history. Dizzying, to say the least.
Thomas Hettche's new book, Herzfaden, or Heartstring. In the novel, a young woman called Hettche is fascinated by the magical world of marionettes. It's based on a true story. Hannelore Elmiger, or Hettche, grew up around puppets. 70 years ago, her father started the legendary Augsburger Puppenkiste. The marionette theater, known for its productions of fairy tales and children's stories, is a household name in Germany. Now, Thomas Hettche tells another tale, that of the theater itself, and its beginning soon after World War II.
The ruins of Augsburg were the historical context for this remarkable story of a puppet chest that was easily transportable and included everything you needed. This project rose out of those ruins.
At first, the Augsburger Puppenkiste was initially a makeshift solution. The hopes and anxiety of post-war German society were reflected in figures like the Kasperle or the Little Prince. But Thomas Hettche has himself delved into the realm of fairy tales in this new book.
I'm interested in the magic of puppets and the magic of fairy tales. That's why I wanted to tell a fairy tale myself. With puppets, I think pulling the strings and bringing them to life is what makes them magical. When you stop pulling the strings, a puppet lying on the ground is really just a dead piece of wood.
Hettche brings together past and present, childhood and adulthood, puppet and human, and shows how they're all tied to each other by invisible strings. The Augsburger Puppenkiste and its puppets document decades of German history. Thomas Hettche lets us embark on a journey to explore the legendary marionette theater and to rediscover the magical worlds of our imagination.
Alles drüber, und wir sind allein.